Section 5, monopsony. So monopsony power, buyer's ability to affect the price of goods. So monopoly case, so charging higher price than marginal cost. That is monopoly power, right? So monopsony power means power to lower its purchasing power. So purchasing price than marginal value. Okay? So marginal value minus price. Right? This one is positive from the perspective of buyers. So that is positive in the case of monopoly. That is, so lower price, charging low, so purchasing good with cheap, lower price than marginal value. Marginal value means, think about marginal utility, demand, right? So marginal utility is, for example, willingness to pay. Marginal utility is $10, but can purchase at $6, for example, right? So purchasing power to pay lower price than marginal value. That is monopsony power. And oligopsony means market with only a few buyers. Monopsony means there exists only one buyer, right? Oligopsony means few buyers. Marginal value, additional benefit derived from purchasing one more unit of a good. So actually, marginal value is marginal utility. Marginal expenditure, additional cost of purchasing one more unit of a good. Average expenditure, price paid for unit of a good. Okay, next slide. So figure 10.13, competitive buyers compared to competitive sellers, right? Competitive sellers' behavior is illustrated in panel B. Competitive sellers, the marginal cost, right? Marginal cost, and price is like this, right? When the market is perfectly competitive, firm's marginal cost is like this, and each firm, supplier, producer face horizontal demand curve. Okay? That is a competitive seller case. Competitive buyer case is like this. Competitive buyer case, panel A, that is panel B, is firm, each buyer's marginal demand curve or marginal value is like this. Demand or marginal value or utility curve, marginal utility curve is like this. And supply curve face horizontal supply curve. Buyers face horizontal supply curve. Right? So competitive seller face horizontal demand curve. Right? Horizontal demand curve. Right? Competitive buyers face horizontal supply curve. Okay? This one is marginal expenditure. Supply curve is average expenditure curve. Right? Average expenditure, horizontal supply curve or horizontal expenditure curve. So horizontal. So marginal expenditure is also same because horizontal. Can you understand? That is illustrated here. In A, the competitive buyer takes market price PW as given. Therefore, marginal expenditure and average expenditure are constant and equal. Quantity purchased is found by equating price to marginal value. Marginal value is demand, right? Expenditure is supply. In B, the competitive seller also takes price as given, right? Marginal revenue and average revenue are constant and equal. So average revenue is equal to marginal revenue. We also already studied this kind of thing in competitive seller case. Competitive buyer case is like this, right? And figure 10.4, monopsonist buyer, right? So this competitive buyer's case is like this, right? Competitive buyer's case is like this. So monopsony case, when there exists only one buyers, right? That is QD, QS, Q, right? Then the demand curve or marginal value is same, right? Demand or marginal value is same. But this one different. Average expenditure and marginal expenditure different, right? Monopsony case, supply curve is usual supply curve. That is supply curve or average expenditure curve, right? Consumers face increasing average expenditure curve or supply curve. Okay? Like this. Average expenditure increase. Then think about relation between marginal and average. I already explained. Average expenditure increase, then marginal expenditure greater than average expenditure. Right, this shaped like this. Right? Then monopsony's decision is marginal expenditure is equal to demand or marginal valuation. So want to demand this amount of good. Right? Where marginal value or demand is equal to marginal expenditure. Right? Can you understand? Then what is the price in this example? Price decided by average expenditure. So price is this one, price S. Okay? When monopsony purchase QS amount of good, marginal value is this one. Marginal value is this one. Right? But purchase at lower price than marginal value. The gap between the two. MB minus price. That is an indicator of monopsony power. We already studied. Right? So look at this again. Because average expenditure is rising, marginal expenditure rises above it. The monopsony is purchase quantity QS in my notation, where marginal expenditure and marginal value intersect. The price paid per unit PS in my notation, here P star, PM star, right? Is then found from the average expenditure curve. Price decided by this one, okay? In a competitive market, the price and quantity PC and QC are both higher. They are found at point where, so if competitive buyers, what happens? Supply or average marginal value should be equal to this one. So price should be here. That is competitive price. And competitive quantity is QC like this. Compared to competitive outcome, price lowered, right? In monopsony case, consumption, demand decrease. Okay? They are found at point where average expenditure and marginal intersect. So look at this. Monopsony and monopoly compared. Monopsony case is panel B. Panel B in figure 10.15. And what is monopoly case? Monopoly case is like this. Monopoly case, marginal cost curve is like this. 내가 이거 그림을, okay, I'm confusing something. Right? Monopoly case, that is demand curve. Consumer face this kind of demand curve. Then marginal revenue curve is like this. Right? So monopoly case, marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So QM is this one and charge this kind of price. That is monopoly price. And that is marginal cost. So we know that the gap between the two is the indicator of monopoly power. That is price minus marginal cost. Right? That is monopoly power. Here, marginal value minus price. Can you understand? That is that kind of explanation is 10.15. Panel A, monopoly split is where marginal revenue intersects marginal cost, average revenue exceeds marginal revenue. So that price exceeds marginal cost. Price exceeds marginal cost. In B, the monopsonist purchase up to the point where marginal expenditure intersects marginal values. Marginal expenditure exceeds average expenditure, so that marginal value exceeds price. Okay, that is panel B, that is panel A in figure 10.15. So, monopsonic power, elastic versus inelastic supply curve. So, this power, the gap between the two, is decided by elasticity of supply. Elasticity of supply. Right? Now, think about the other case. The supply is this one. Supply curve is this one. Right? Now, think about marginal value, same. Marginal value, same slope like this. And supply curve is less elastic than this. More elastic than this. Then supply curve or average expenditure curve shaped like this. Slope. Right? Then marginal expenditure is like this. Marginal expenditure is like this. That is MB, marginal value, right? Then optimal quantity should be marginal expenditure and marginal expenditure and marginal value. So at this point, QS, right? Monopsonic case. And charge price here. Right? Price decided on this average expenditure curve or supply curve. That is price and that is MP. So the gap between the two is smaller than this. Okay? So the point is that monopsonic power depends on price elasticity of supply. Right? That is illustrated in figure 10.6. Monopsonic power depends on the elasticity of supply. When supply is elastic like this graph, marginal expenditure and average expenditure do not differ by much. So price is close to what it would be in a competitive market. The opposite is true when supply is inelastic like this. In inelastic supply curve case, large gap between marginal value and its price. Sources of monopsonic power. Number one, elasticity of market supply. If only one buyer is in the market, a pure monopsonic case. In this case, its monopoly power is completely determined by elasticity of market supply. Okay? If supply is highly elastic, monopsonic power is small, and there is a little gain in being the only one buyer. But if supply curve is inelastic, then monopsonist has a large of monopsonic power. Okay? And number two, numbers of buyers. The story is very similar to sources of monopoly power, right? In monopsonic case here. Numbers of buyers. When the numbers of buyers is very large, no single buyer can have much influence over price. Thus, each buyer faces an extremely elastic supply curve, so that the market is almost completely competitive. Number of buyers increase, then monopsonic power decrease and decrease. Okay? And number three, interaction among buyers. If four buyers in a market compete aggressively, they will bid up the price. Competition increase, right? Compete aggressively. Buyers compete aggressively. Then the price approaching to marginal value of a product and will thus have little monopsonic power. On the other hand, if those buyers compete less aggressively or even collude, cooperative, right? Then price will not be bid up very much, and the buyer's degree of monopsonic power might be nearly as high as if there was only one buyer. In other words, monopsonic case. They can charge really lower price than marginal value. So next slide. Deadweight loss from monopsonic power. Okay? So we know, anyway, we're using this one. In competitive case, consumer surplus is this one. Right? Monopsonic case, consumer surplus is this one, right? So that is A, B, C, A, B, C. So computative case, consumer surplus is this one, right? But monopsonic case, consumer surplus is this one, right? Consumer surplus is less than price like this, right? So look at it. The shaded rectangular triangle shows change in buyer and seller surplus when moving from computative price and quantity PC and QC. The monopsonic price and quantity PM and QM. Because both price and quantity are lower, there is an increase in buyer surplus given by A minus B, right? Originally this one, but consumer surplus, this one and this one and, consumer, marginal value, supply, right? So consumer surplus usually this one, right? This one, but monopsonic case, price is here, supply curve is here, so this one. So consumer surplus that is produce surplus. Produce surplus, change in produce surplus. So originally, produce surplus is this one, but monopsonic case, this one. Price is here, so this one, right? So produce surplus decreased by this one to this one. So minus A plus C, right? Minus A plus C. Minus A plus C. Produce surplus here, now here. So minus A plus C. Change in consumer surplus, this one to this one. So A minus B. That is A minus B. Right? So deadweight loss or decrease in national welfare when the market changes from computative to monopsonic case disappeared, and minus B minus C. Right? So produce surplus plus A plus C. There is a deadweight loss given by triangle B and C. So deadweight loss is B and C. This is deadweight loss in monopsonic case. And next slide. Bilateral monopoly. Bilateral monopoly, market with only one seller and one buyer. So very tricky, isn't it, in that case, right? So producers, monopoly case. Okay. So monopsonic case, price lower, right? So there is some buyers have some power to reduce, to lower its price, right? Monopoly case, for example, monopoly case, marginal cost curve, demand curve, marginal revenue curve, right? So price is here, and that is marginal cost, price. Price increase over marginal cost. There is a power, supply has a power to increase price. So effect on price is quite the opposite with each other. Bilateral monopoly is only one seller and one buyer. It's difficult to predict the price and quantity in a bilateral monopoly. Both the buyer and seller are in a bargaining situation. In that case, monopolist and monopolist bargain to decide price and quantity. Bilateral monopsony is a very rare case. Although bargaining may still be involved, we can apply a love principle here. Monopsony power and monopoly power will tend to counteract each other. In other words, monopsony power of buyers will reduce the effective monopoly power of sellers and vice versa. This tendency does not mean that is true, but this does not mean that the market will end up looking perfectly competitive outcome. But in general, monopsony power will push price close to marginal cost, and the monopoly power will push price close to marginal value. Okay? Okay, an example of monopsony in the U.S. manufacturing. So, automakers, car makers purchase lots of parts and components, electronic components, right? So, automakers monopsonist position when they purchase parts and components from small and medium size, some first vendor or second vendor, right? The role of monopsony power was investigated to determine the extent to which variation in price-cost margins could be attributed to variations in monopsony power. The study found that buyers' monopsony power had an important effect on the price-cost margins of sellers. In industries where only 4 or 5 buyers account for all of nearly all sales, the price-cost margin of sellers would on average be as much as 10% points lower than comparable industries within hundreds of buyers accounting for sale. Each major car producers in the U.S., same in Korea, for example, Hyundai Motors can purchase lots of parts and components from small and medium-sized companies with cheaper costs, really lower costs, right? So monopsonist position. For specialized parts, a single auto company may be only buyer. As a result, automobile companies have considerable monopsony power. Not surprisingly, producers of parts and components usually have little or no monopoly power at all. Same thing happened even in Korea, right? So Hyundai Motors purchase large parts and components with a lower price than marginal value. So Hyundai Motors in the some monopsonist position. So okay, this one is U.S. example. Okay, limiting market power, the antitrust law. Exercising market powers harms potential purchasers and raises problems of equity and fairness. In addition, market power reduces output, which leads to a deadweight loss. That is conclusion until now. Right? Monopoly is really bad thing. Monopsony is really bad thing from the perspective of national welfare. Right? In theory, a firm's excess profit could be taxed away, but redistribution of a firm's profit is often impractical. To limit the market power of a natural monopoly, such as electric utility company, direct price regulation is the answer. I already explained average cost pricing, right? In natural monopoly case. Antitrust laws, rules and regulations prohibiting actions that restrain or are likely to restrain competition. It is important to stress that while there are limitations such as colluding with other firms in general, it is not illegal to be a monopolist or to have a market power. On the contrary, we have seen that patent and copyright law protect the monopoly position of firms that developed unique innovation, right? So antitrust law is really important, very significant in developed countries, right? So anyway, until now we know that when the market is perfectly competitive, everything, national welfare maximized automatically. That is Adam Smith's invisible hand story, isn't it? But the market structure is featured by monopoly, for example. Then what happened? Deadweight loss happened. National welfare decrease, right? Sacrificed by some monopolist or monopsony, usually monopolist. In that case, so government have to intervene at the market to increase national welfare using antitrust laws. Okay, so antitrust laws is a really important thing, and they're usually exercised by Fair Trade Commission, Fair Trade Committee, for example. That is a really important thing to enhance market economy. Okay? But in that sense, developed countries, they emphasize antitrust law. But in developing countries like Korea is not developing country, but we have some idea that capitalist development is something. So we have to disregard capitalist system or market economy. that is not correct some remedy for problems of market economy, right? Monopoly should be checked by antitrust law in the direction that competition increase. Monopoly means no competition, so lots of deadweight loss happen, right? So competition should be strengthened. In this direction, government intervene at the market to enhance the performance of market economy. Can you understand? Right? And next slide. Restricting what firms can do. Parallel conduct, the form of implicit collusion in which one firm consistently follows actions of another. And predatory pricing, practice of pricing to drive current competitors out of business and to discourage new entries in a market so that a firm can enjoy higher future profit. So, enforcement of antitrust law. So, basic purpose of antitrust law is to control some monopolist behavior to reduce competition. Okay? The antitrust laws are enforced in three ways. Number one, through antitrust division of Department of Justice. This is a U.S. case. Number two, through the administrative procedures of Federal Trade Commission. Number three, through private proceedings. So antitrust in Europe is more stronger than the case of the United States. And we can find lots of same thing. Right? For example, antitrust of EU are quite similar to those of US. Article 101 of Treaty of European Community is much like Section 1 of Sherman Act in the US. Article 102, which focuses on abuses of market power by dominant firms, is similar in many ways to Section 2 of Sherman Act. The European Merger Control Act is similar in spirit of Section 7 of Clayton Act in the United States. Merger evaluation typically are conducted more quickly in Europe. Antitrust enforcement has grown rapidly through the world in the past decades. All enforcement agents meet at least once each year through the acquisition auspices of the International Competition Network. Okay, so and that is some case of example. So anyway, I'd like to emphasize one more time, right? Monopoly is bad thing usually, except natural monopoly, right? Because competition reduced, right? And monopolists extra profit increase, sacrificing national welfare, right? That is A minus C or B minus C like this. That way laws happen. So using antitrust law, government, all the developed countries' governments wants to increase competition, to increase national welfare. Okay? That is most important factor in this section. Okay? I'd like to stop here.